Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Deliverance from Addiction. Is marijuana as safe as state governments and those that advocate its use would like you to believe? The short answer is no. If you found your way to this video through TikTok or YouTube Shorts, you received that short answer. Now here's a long answer and the explanation you've been looking for. Their answer is no because of multiple reasons. It's been found that marijuana smoke contains some of the same toxic chemicals that tobacco smoke has, believe it or not. If I could read from the state of California's P65 warnings website, and if you don't know, for those of you outside the state of California don't know what Proposition 65 is, Proposition 65 says, and I'm going to read this from my notes. Proposition 65 requires businesses to provide warnings to Californians about significant exposures to chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects, or other reproductive harm. Exposure to these chemicals may take place when products are acquired or used. Exposure may occur in homes, workplaces, or other environments in California. By requiring that this information be provided, Proposition 65 enables Californians to make informed decisions about exposures to these chemicals. And this doesn't apply to Californians, it applies to everything, but this is the California state law. And this is what the website says. And this is warnings about exposure to marijuana smoke, which, by the way, is the overwhelming prevalent way that marijuana gets used, as if you didn't know that already. The website says cannabis, or aka marijuana smoke, is on the Proposition 65 list because it can cause developmental harm and cancer. During pregnancy, smoking cannabis or being heavily exposed to cannabis smoke can harm the development of the child. It may affect the child's birth weight, behavior, and learning ability. Smoking cannabis or being exposed to cannabis smoke may increase the risk of cancer. Proposition 65 goes on and talks about the dangerous chemicals in marijuana smoke. It says, quote, cannabis smoke contains several thousand different chemicals, some of which are on the Proposition 65 list. These include chemicals that can affect the baby when the mother is exposed to them during pregnancy, such as THC, which, in case you didn't know, was the chemical in marijuana that makes you high, which may affect behavior, learning ability, and susceptibility to drug addiction in offspring. That's interesting. We'll have more on that in our next video. Other chemicals that cause cancer and or reproductive harm, such as benzene, benzoprene, 1,3-butadiene, cadmium, carbon monoxide, hexavalent chromium, formaldehyde, yikes, lead, mercury, and nickel. Well, those are very toxic chemicals, if you didn't know that. Many of these chemicals are also in tobacco smoke, like I was saying before, which is on the Proposition 65 list as causing cancer and birth defects and other reproductive harm. Yeah, not a good idea. Smoking marijuana, as if you couldn't tell. If that wasn't enough to make you go yikes, there's been a more recent study done on the subject as well. It was done by, and I'm also reading from my notes too, a new study headed by Dr. Niels Kokot, a professor of clinical otolaryngology, hope I pronounced that right, head and neck surgery at the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. It says, a new study has claimed that smokers who partake in heavy marijuana use are significantly more likely to develop head and neck cancers. Dr. Kolka says, quote, our research shows that people who use cannabis, particularly those with a cannabis use disorder, are significantly more likely to develop head and neck cancers compared to those who do not use cannabis. And head and neck cancers include cancers of the throat, the trachea, salivary glands, as well as tumors in the mouth. Colcott's team explained, quote, the smoke content of cannabis contains carcinogens similar to those found in tobacco. There's your second witness right there. Colcott's study focused and diagnosed those with problematic cannabis-related disorders, which is diagnosed as a person with 2 or more of the following symptoms: frequently craving cannabis, becoming tolerant to excess, aka having a high tolerance, using more than intended, using even if it causes problems in daily life, using in high-risk situations, experiencing mental withdrawal, and generally unable to quit, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It further goes on to say the study was conducted by looking at over 116,000 records of people who were diagnosed with a problematic cannabis-related disorder. The rate of head and neck cancers were examined in that group in comparison with a group of head and neck and cancer patients who did not have cannabis use disorder. Quote, we found that the relative risk of developing head and neck cancer for those with cannabis-related disorders ranged from 3.5 to 5 times that of those without cannabis-related disorders, Colcott's research team wrote. The study mainly focuses on cannabis use by the way of smoking, as it is the most commonly consumed by smoking, like I said before, Colcott wrote. The association we found likely pertains mainly to smoked cannabis. Very interesting study. And I will put a link to this study and the Prop 65 websites in the description below so you can look at them for yourself. And this article I'm actually reading from says, additionally, Dr. Michael Blasco, the director of head and neck oncology and reconstruction at Northwell Health in Staten Island, weighed in on the research findings. Quote, Now we know that there is a link between cannabis use and head and neck cancer. I would say that we've proven that link, Blasco says. We don't necessarily know what the threshold is that seems to greatly increase the risk, but we know that heavy users have higher risks. So I would 100% tell patients that there's a link between head and neck cancer and cannabis use. That will make users think twice, hopefully. This is part of a growing body of literature that shows that there are measurable negative health effects of cannabis use, he continued, whether that's effects on the lungs, whether that's effects on the mood and addiction. And then there's a part of a growing body of literature that suggests association with cancer. So we're learning more and more about the long-term health effects of cannabis. So there you go. You got 3 witnesses that saying smoking cannabis is very bad for your health. So that was your long explanation you've been looking for. Now, like I said, I'll put links below to all these things that I quoted and read from, so you can read them for yourselves and make an informed opinion for yourselves. And hopefully, if you're a marijuana user, hopefully you do the wise thing and for the sake of your own health, quit. But this is just part 1 of my 3-part marijuana series, and all 3 parts will have a different title and deal with a different aspect of marijuana. So that's about it for part 1. So look forward to part 2 coming up in the near future. Hope to see you there. Later all.